How long did it take you to realize that?
10 minutes. No. One game. All
Okay,
right,
okay.
we should be live now. So thanks for dealing with the technical difficulties, Balk. But we finally have your beautiful face up on the stream.
I'm glad I'm not crashing your computer this time.
I might be the one crashing my own computer. All right. So yeah, today's stream is going to be a little bit different. Not going to be doing gameplay or even reviews of gameplay, but we're actually going to be going through essentially all the data that I've collected on Silph Factions over the last cycle. And I guess we'll start off by showing...
So what data have you collected? Just usage of Mons and the results?
Yeah, so why don't we actually talk about that in a couple of minutes, just because I want to make sure, people get their chance to kind of mosey on in here, especially since given our little late start. But essentially, yeah, what I did was I collected data of usage of Mons and whether that team of 6 went 3-0, 2-1, 1-2, or 0-3. So pretty much nothing too fancy, but enough to kind of start getting pictures, or at least like, large scale pictures of what people are kind of thinking about when they're using these mods. Yeah. And so I guess, I mean, I can kind of like go through really quickly just to give a quick example for you, and then maybe we can get into like more nitty gritty stuff afterwards. It's gonna take a little while to construct, I guess. Let's see what's going. I think it's struggling here. There we go. Cool. All right. So I mean, for example, here I have data for essentially Ultra League for all of the regions. So the 4 regions are APAC, Europe, and Middle. Is MEA like Mediterranean, Middle Eastern, Africa?
Europe, Middle East, and Africa.
Okay, yeah, there we go. Latin America and North America. And so this is taking data from the Diamond and Emerald tier teams and just basically saying, all right, like what's gotten the most usage, what's gotten the most wins, so on and so forth. So I guess we can talk about this a little bit, and then we can kind of go deep into it once we get more people coming in here. But the first column is just how many times people have used these teams or these mons. So you can actually sort by the usage. It might take a little while because I got a lot of processes loading right now. But apparently, the highest used mon was Shadow Needle Queen.
Makes
So
sense.
that's, yeah. What were you saying?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That was one they newly unrestricted for this cycle, right?
Yeah. And so the next one up was Registeel, which I'm pretty sure was restricted.
Yes.
And yet a lot of people use it, kind of indicative of how busted it was. And then like third up was Pidgeot. And so basically we can go through and say, how many mons were used there. And then next up is just the percentages. So just kind of like a quick breakdown. So you don't have to think about like, what does it mean for 194 people to use it? Well, in fact, that just means that 27% of all these teams we're analyzing are actually using that. So that's kind of like that information right there. And then we can go on. We can talk about how many wins it has. So essentially, each time this mon gets used, you can get up to 3 wins, right? And that information is pretty much inversely related to how many losses you have. Like once in a while you get the 2-0-0-2 kind of situation. But roughly you can say if a mon has 3 wins, then that means whatever it beat up had 0 wins. And then you can calculate a win score from that, which is just basically how many wins a Pokemon has divided by how many times that Pokemon was used. So if you think a Pokemon was like exactly average, then you would imagine that it has a win score of 1.5. In fact, right here, that's kind of what it's telling us here. So things that have a slightly higher win score means that it performs slightly better than just completely random, flip a coin for every matchup you have.
Makes sense.
And so all of those are, pretty straightforward. I think the last value that I calculated is a little bit different. Like I don't exactly know what it tells us, but the idea of what it's supposed to tell us is kind of give higher weights to Pokemon that have been used a lot. So, you can have a Pokemon that's gone 3-0. So I think someone went 3-0 in Master League with something completely bizarre. I don't even remember what.
Say
Like
a Scavalier or something.
Scavalier, Munchlax, something like that, right? And you're just like, oh man, is Munchlax like really busted? It's like, well, no, it only had one data point, right? Like only one person used it. Like something weird happened. Maybe their other 5 mons were so much better than the other 6. Like, you know, it just matched up really well. And so this normalized win score is essentially trying to take the amount of usage that a Pokemon has and kind of factor that in there. And I think the way it works is that I take the win score, I subtract it by 1.5, so like just take it down to average, and then anything, and then I multiply it by roughly like the amount of usage it gets. And so anything that's higher than 0 means that it has a positive win score, i.e., it did better than expected. And the bigger the normalized win score, either like the few times it was used, it did really, really well, or it did pretty well, but it's been used a lot. So you can kind of see like the first few mods up here have drastically higher normalized win scores, just because it's been used a lot. In fact, like Registeel is kind of busted here, right? Like this tells us, like, surprise, surprise, Registeel did a lot better given its usage rate than, say, Nidoqueen did.
Right.
And so you can kind of look at this. We can sort by normalized win score. We can sort by win score. But essentially, this is kind of like a measure of telling us, you know, what Pokemon are truly busted. So Registeel, truly busted because it gets a lot of usage and it has a very high win score. It can also tell us what Pokemon have been used a lot but have less than average kind of results. So the first one here is Trevenant. So basically, Trevenant picked up a 1.42 win score. So it's like it got 1.4 wins per every bout. And the normalized win score tells us that despite it being slightly negative, a lot of people used it. 22% of people use it. So like that drops its normalized win score by quite a bit. And if you say you can sort by normalized win score, basically what that tells us is that essentially the mons that end up being used a lot and have a decent win rate or win score will rise up to the top. But you can start picking out some kind of weird picks. So like, for example, the third highest normalized win score for this filter is Origin Giratina, which is something I would never think of using in Ultra League now. But it turns out that, you know, 10% of people did. And out of those, you had a normalized win score of 1.72, which is a pretty high win rate. I don't know. Maybe the APAC people are kind of a little fancy or something. I don't really know.
Yeah, it's an interesting pick. Like, it's got the multiple options of fast moves, the Shadow Claw, Dragon Tail, depending on what the opponent has. So it's got that versatility going for it. I still like Cofagrigus or Altered Form over it, though.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, this isn't necessarily, I think, like, a lot of this data is, like, I'm not really making a value proposition here. In fact, if anything, I haven't really been keeping up with factions because I've been really busy the last cycle. So, like, all these things is, like, I'm a blank slate. I'm just looking, I was like, I don't know. Apparently, Origin Giratina is a sleeper pick or something like that, right? And, like, you know, we can look down and just kind of, like, pick out the ones with lower usage, like Venusaur. 7% usage, but still pretty high normalized win score. Skarmory, so on and so forth. And so you can kind of look at that. So this is kind of a very data representation. This is kind of like what goes on in the back end. But you know, what I ended up doing was, and what we'll like kind of talk about a bit more, is visualizing all this data with some error bars. So like the error bars are just basically proportional to how much usage it gets. So like, you know, the higher the usage, the smaller the error bar will get relative to its score. So yeah, so that's pretty much a breakdown of more or less what I've been looking at or working with. And so, you know, just waiting for people to trickle in. I was wondering if you had a preferred format we can just start talking about, or maybe we can go look at the Silph page and just kind of talk about, oh, you know, this is what people are saying from what Silph page. Like, you know, you start us off because you're kind of the expert here. I'm just the person with a lot of the random data.
Yeah, well, I always prefer Open Great League, so if we can start there, that would be something that's right up my alley.
All right, so Open Great League. So basically, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say I want Open Great League, and I am primarily curious about this last cycle, so Season 2, Cycle 1, and I'll put in all of the bouts, so bouts 1 to 9. And maybe later on we can like even talk about like what happens if we just look at subsections of bouts, like what happens between bouts 1 to 3. That's kind of an option. And at least starting off for the tier, I'll set the tier to say diamond and emerald, because that's kind of what you kind of think about as quote unquote cream of the crop. And then I'll put in all the regions, but we can like definitely look at North American specifically later on because both of us are from North America. But so what we have here is essentially sorted from highest to lowest Pokemon that have a certain normalized win score. So I described what the normalized win score is a little bit earlier, but essentially the higher the better. And some error bars to kind of just basically say, how much usage did he get, and is this score that you're trying to predict or tell us, is that like just within error of like, it could have easily gone poorly some other way, and then some people would be like pretty bad. So the first thing I want to point out, the very interesting things are the Pokemon that end up having even their lower win score being above this red line here. So what that indicates is that even after we take into account, hey Heskin, thanks for coming out, man. Really appreciate it. Hope if you have any questions, let us know, and I'd love to kind of address it. And with Balk actually giving expert advice, I'm just like looking at numbers. But but basically here you see 2 Pokemon right off the bat that have higher like kind of like confidence intervals than that of 0. So what 2 Pokemon would you think they are?
So we're looking at Altaria and Registeel here, right?
So that's what, so it doesn't actually show everything because of the font size, which I think is why the font size was smaller originally. But Altaria is one of them. Altaria is this one right here. So basically, what this tells us is that out of all the teams, Altaria was used 76 times, and it has a normalized win score of 3. So it's pretty high score. But the number 1 winner here is actually Toxicroak. So we can kind of show Toxicroak here. So Toxicroak was actually used more than Altaria, I think. Yeah, used more than Altaria, and had a very, very high win score. So, just like kind of given what you know about Ultra League, did you ever bring Toxicroak? Did you think it was a good pick? Like, what do you think is going on there?
Yeah, I brought it at least, I want to say 3 or 4 times. I don't think it's the best fighter in the meta, but it's like one of the better B-list fighters, and it's really valuable for its ability to beat Registeel down shields, which very few fighters can do. Like even the big ones like Deoxys, Medicham, they need shields up to beat it. So Toxie is valuable for that, and its ability to threaten fairies and even some flyers with the Sludge Bomb.
Yeah, definitely. So also another thing to note, like kind of looking at this visualization, is basically the bigger the circle, the more usage it gets, right? So both Altaria and Toxicroak have relatively medium-sized bubbles. So the first thing I want to point out, like while we're kind of going through, we can basically go through and see like the who's of good Open Great League Pokemon. So next up is Cofagrigus, done very well. I think being one of those, it's not restricted, right?
It's not.
Yeah, so being the unrestricted ghost type kind of really helped its usage rate go up quite a bit. And I think all 3 of these Pokemon are unrestricted, if I'm correct.
Altaria was restricted.
Oh, Altaria was restricted. Gotcha. And that explains why it was comparatively lower, which maybe that just says the restriction was a good restriction, because the amount of times it was used, it did do pretty well. And then Registeel's next up. Registeel got, I think, quite a bit of usage, an insane amount of usage. Still did pretty well. And then you have Walrein, Shadow Walrein, Noctowl. So Noctowl is kind of an interesting one up here. Can you talk a little bit more about Noctowl?
Yeah, I played it a couple times, or at least once. It's not one of my favorite flyers to use. It's valuable for walling ghost types, as well as beating fighters. But losing hard to Reggie is a problem, and it can go neutral with a lot of things, but it's not beating much hard except the ghost.
And then after that, kind of rounding out this bit, Talonflame. Talonflame is actually a really interesting one that I'll get back to in a bit, but on average, it seems like Talonflame did pretty well.
Yeah, it's one of those mons that can just take over a game if it gets rolling.
Definitely. And then going down a bit more, Obstagoon, Shadow Alolan Marowak. So that's kind of like that was a mid Psycho edition, right?
Yeah, I think that popped up like cycle 4 or 5, or about 4 or 5.
Yeah, and we can actually kind of check that out in a bit. And then Diggersby. So these are all Mons: Diggersby, Galvantula, Swampert, Shadow Swampert, Walrein, Trevenant. So all of these are still tracking above this red line, as you can see, but now the confidence interval is kind of dipping below that of what we would assume is like a good a good Mon. So it could fall within that error, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then sort of going down a little bit more, Drapion, Jellicent, Mandibuzz, Alolan Ninetales, Vigoroth, and I think that's like a pretty good cutoff for the core cast of Pokemon. So right off the bat, like, are there any monsters just like, wait a second, where is this one? I thought this one was really good, or maybe like kind of surprise picks to you that's located in the top half.
Yeah, like one of the most metamons in Open Great League I can think of is Medicham, Sableye, Galarian Stunfisk. We haven't even mentioned those yet.
Okay, so I think you're kind of getting a little bit to the punchline here, but yeah, so like there are definitely some of these Pokemon that you would normally think are pretty high up, but for one reason or another, maybe it's usage, maybe it's like like win rate or something like that, really drops that score down. So I think aside from this, we can kind of like skip over a lot of these kind of mons in the middle. You can tell that they're kind of very small points. So like Victory Bell, Shadow Victory Bell, technically got used 3 times. Technically did better than average. Not a huge reliable data point. There's this really big point here, Sableye. So that's the first one you talked about, right? Like Sableye should be pretty busted in Open Great League, but it kind of falls behind a lot of the other Pokemon despite getting pretty high usage.
So we're seeing here that it's either winning a lot or getting destroyed.
Well, it's a little bit hard to tell. So what this is saying is, yeah, like so it will like kind of average into account what the standard deviation is more or less. And so it seems like somewhat of a variable Pokemon, right? Even though it's been used 227 times in this sample set, it's still pretty high variation. So it's kind of telling us, yeah, it's like either getting destroyed or not being the destroyer. And then so we can kind of skip around and go down to the bottom half. So what do you think, like what mons have we not covered yet that you would expect there to be? Remembering that a lot of these like points, the larger they are, the more they're used.
So we're looking for things that are used a lot and underperforming. Like for me personally, the one time I brought Medicham, I got swept. So maybe that's closer to the bottom here.
Okay, so we'll go down to the bottom. So basically, you start seeing like in the middle, all these teams or all these Pokemon, very small sample size, not a lot of information to tell you whether or not they're actually getting wrecked or not. So, but there are like these 5 things here. So what's at the very bottom is actually G-Fisk. So is that kind of a surprise to you? Because like
that's a big surprise. Like for me, that's might be the best mon in the Open Great League meta. Like easily the top 2 steel tanks. And it beats Reggie, beats Charmers, beats Flyers. So seeing it at the bottom by this metric is pretty surprising.
Yeah. Well, so the metric is based off of essentially, how much they've won. So like you won't get a negative normalized win score if you're doing better than that. So if we like look at here at the win score, and we can actually look up Stunfisk Galar. Is it Stunfisk Galar, or it should be
Galar Stunfisk?
No, I had this on Master, so let's sort it by grade.
Oh. I wonder if someone played there. That'd be pretty cool.
I'm not gonna do that to myself. But yeah, it's the win score was 1.43, and the percentages were about 26%. So like 26% of teams brought in a G-Fisk, but it only ended up winning about 1.43. And so this is kind of like where you see that normalized win score really encapsulating both those points of data. Like, in and of itself, a win score of 1.43 is like bad, but not the worst. That being said, like considering that it was used in 26% of all teams, and you could at best get a 1.43, that's like that gives it a huge ding there. So moving back here, another Pokemon that shows up. So like Cresselia is pretty low here. Scrafty, also pretty low. Medicham, so kind of one of your sleeper picks for being a dud, also pretty low here. It's been used 145 times, and it has a pretty negative win rate. And then kind of rounding out the bottom, we have Lickitung. So I know another Balk favorite.
Personal favorite, yes.
Azu, Umbreon, DD, Ferrothorn, which is kind of a small point, Shadow Ninetales, and that's pretty much it in terms of like kind of the interesting things to pick out.
Champ would be tough. Okay.
Yeah. Hello, is this the Malamar analysis stream? No, it isn't. We will talk about Malamar later though, in passing, in very brief passing. So yeah, so we talked about a lot of these mons. Another feature that we have is we can actually just like punch in to say what mon. So like, what mon are you really curious about?
Lickitung.
Lickitung. Okay, so I think I already saw Lickitung, so I don't have to actually look for it. But it is right here. So it is in 5th place from the bottom, but it sports a comparatively smaller usage rate of about 0.74, but a normalized win score of -1.4. So that's basically saying it's not doing too hot. And we can actually look at the kind of raw stats for Lickitung right here. And what Lickitung is telling me here. So this is basically without the standard deviation bars, but otherwise the same data. And this just gives us the regular win score. So basically how many points did it score per bout. And so what this tells us is that it scored 1.36 wins per bout. So that's pretty bad, all things considered. And essentially, the fact that it wasn't used as much meant it got dinged a bit less than what it otherwise would have shown. So like if we can also sort by win score, and we sort
what's
the
the
Pokemon.
worst thing according to that?
Yeah, so we sort just by win score. There's a bunch of zeros because you can use a Pokemon once.
Okay.
Huh?
People brought Swoobat in Diamond or Emerald?
I guess, yeah. Yeah, someone brought Swoobat.
Wow.
So there's that. The first one with like a reasonable win score is Umbreon. So that's 1.23. And that was used 30 times. And you have Mew, Scrafty, Tropius, Rainy Castform, Shadow Hypno, Shadow Sableye, Wishcast, Cresselia, Lapras, Shadow Lapras, and Lickitung. So Lickitung's not doing well in either metric. Yeah. Which is, I think part of that really is what else is restricted? Like Sableye is restricted.
Sableye was restricted. Registeel, Stunfisk, Walrein,
Medi.
Trevin, Medi, Deoxys. What else?
So both the psychic fighters and a lot of the ghosts that you would expect Licky to prey on naturally, at least in Open Great League, are kind of gone from that pool, right? You get Cough, but that's pretty much it. And like, is Azu also?
Yes, it was.
Yeah. So Azu, I would say, is another kind of thing your Licky is like pretty happy to get on. So yet another kind of target that Lickitung doesn't really have.
So can we look at the most used mons just to see what it would be bad and good against?
Yeah, so that is not going to be super easily plotted there, but I can just show this in the data breakdown. So the most used mons in Great League for the same filters are, let's see, count team data, sort by that. So Registeel was, is that even right? Holy crap. Registeel was used the most.
40% of team. Wow.
40%, yeah. Sableye was next up, 32%. And then you have Stunfisk Galar, Talonflame, Trevenant, Noctowl, Medicham, Walrein, Cough, Toxicroak, Azu at about 17%.
Yeah, so there's not a whole lot there it really wants to see. Sableye's fine,
Yeah.
Trevenant's great, Walrein's okay, Cofagrigus fine. But a lot of that stuff is hard counters or neutral to losing matchups.
Yeah. Yeah, Wendy. So we're only looking at Open Great League right now. But if you have any questions, feel free to put it in the chat and we'll like kind of hop around. It's kind of like really, exploring the data from basically here's my numbers perspective, and then Balk saying this is why you're wrong, or this is why this is kind of interesting. But yeah, feel free to post whatever you got going on inside the chat.
I don't care what the numbers say, Malamar is the best.
Yeah, no, I don't believe that. That I don't believe. that is incorrect, I believe is the correct statement. Yeah. So that's pretty much it. I do want to show something kind of interesting. So let's filter by Talonflame. So this is something that I noticed was interesting when I was looking at the data. So we have Talonflame right here. So this is pretty much accounting for all Diamond and Emerald and all regions. Something you can focus on, you can either focus on the win score, so it's 1.57, or the normalized win score, 1.69. Both of them will like basically tell you if it's like better or worse, right? And the usage rate, which is about 25%. Now, if I only look at, say, North America, then Talonflame is pretty abysmal, actually. It's like a 1.41% win score. Normalized win score is minus 2.81, and it was actually used about 31% of the time. So kind of interesting. Now, if we look at Latin America, looking again at Talonflame, Latin America had a field day with Talonflame. Talonflame was probably one of its best performers, and we can check that in a bit, like going on down the line. And it was only used about 17% of the time. If we look at Europe, Middle East, and Africa, again, we have a pretty reasonable win score, pretty good normalized win score, pretty high usage rate.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, if we look at APAC, what APAC does with the bird is they have a 1.68 win score with a 3.71 normalized win score. So it's actually kind of funny. Like you see Talonflame being like one of the best performers. North America pulled down Talonflame by quite a bit. If you like kind of look at the performance of all the Pokemon except for North America usage, Talonflame would actually be, I want to say near the top.
One of the best there.
I want to say one of the best.
3.21 is pretty good.
It's third. It's third.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting to like note that you know, despite the data that we're working with, so like right here, what this is telling me is like we've worked with about I guess like close to 400 or 500 different teams, and just like without North America, and like you know even the data's like pretty nice, but like not super big to like make very grand conclusions. But even there, it's kind of interesting to see like the variations by region there. So that's kind of like another cool thing you can like query about the data, right? Like the Labyrinth Logan effect. Yeah, I mean Logan might have single-handedly like wrecked Talonflame, honestly. So not to put an ex-teammate on blast, but we can actually look up Talonflame. And so these are all aggregate data, right? Like, you know, we don't really know who is.
We don't have individual matchups here.
We don't easily have individual matchups, but we can actually look at it. So let me see if I can't. Let me see if I remember how to do this. I'm gonna have to exit out of this really quick.
Is that a cat I hear?
It is my cat. Yeah, he really wants to come in. I might actually let him in, but in a bit. So we can actually put. Let's see. This is gonna load.
This will show us everyone who ran this thing. Okay.
Yeah. So this actually breaks down essentially everyone that ran it and how they did with it. Balk, I noticed you ran it 3 times. Actually, that's kind of impressive. You picked up 6 wins with it, so that's a win score of 2. So you are not hurting that. So Wendy, I am not tracking combination of mons, but that is definitely on my once I actually become a data scientist to-do list. I am currently not a data scientist, so it is not easily done. But Balk, the homie, is really helping out here. Lapras, Logan, you also used it 3 times. He picked up 5 wins with it. So Logan actually was not responsible for hurting the poor thing.
No, that's solid. So
that's solid.
Where did it get destroyed?
Where did he get destroyed? Wait, actually I should sort it by win score. Yeah, win score. So win score, Gucci Gang used it once, didn't pick up a win with it. Luke picked it, used Ifelici, used it once, didn't pick up a win with it. Chump played it 3 times and picked up 3 wins, so kind of hurts a little bit there.
Mhm.
Dialop used it 5 times and picked up a win score of 1.4, so below average. Frosty,
Still okay.
same thing there, yeah.
Mhm.
And then Lawson Cody also used it twice. Shady Equation used it 2 times, picked up a win score of 1. So there's quite a bit of people that just really didn't, I guess, like 3-0 with it kind of vibes, you know. But all in all,
Yeah.
a lot of people decided to use it at least once to kind of spice things up and didn't look too hot. And then we have 2 people who used it quite a bit and like to negative results. Chump, hey, thanks for coming out. I'm sorry I'm putting you on blast right now, but you're not helping the argument with our dear bird Talonflame. Basically, what we just discussed was if you excluded North America, Talonflame was the 3rd best Pokemon in Open Great League for factions. If you include North America, it drops it by quite a bit. But yeah. So we can.
So what you're saying is the rest of the world is better at playing Talonflame than we are.
Maybe it's kind of funny though because like isn't Talonflame supposed to be busted if you can sneak moves and all that stuff? Because like server pings and all.
Oh yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's clearly in APAC it doesn't matter because they can blow things up just the same. So yeah, that was a breakdown on Great League. So I think something interesting to note is why don't we compare it to essentially what Silph says about Great League. So let me blow this up a little bit, make it easier for people on stream to read. One more time. Too many times. Okay, so basically they mentioned that according to their data, the most common Pokemon in all tiers were, these 5, which we expect. The highest win rate Pokemon were Coffergigas, Surfetched. In Surfetch, you can kind of see Surfetch in Emerald and Diamond, 50%, but in Platinum and Open, it was 54%. So that's kind of very interesting. Toxicroak, which is something we discussed here, so you can see that like kind of effect of Toxicroak doing much better in Emerald and Diamond. Walrein and Noctowl, where it Noctowl in Emerald and Diamond kind of did worse, and Platinum Open kind of did better. So I don't actually know if this highest win rate data, I don't know like how they picked them out. So let's see what this article says.
Does that agree with your own analysis?
So I want to say, I think not exactly, just because I think they might just be picking out like the just like the raw win rates. You know what I mean?
Not adjusting it for usage.
Yeah, exactly. Chump, I'm Chump. I trust you, man. I love Talonflame. It is Talonflame is punk. It's a punishing Pokemon to use, really. Hey Uzo, thanks for coming out, man.
Hey, welcome.
Yeah, it's definitely a punishing Pokemon.
Besides,
so like, what's up?
No, we all know that Chump really loves Pidgeot more than Talon.
Pidgeot. Oh, okay. Yeah, maybe you can use Pidgeot. Pidgeot, I think, did pretty well in Ultra specifically. But yeah. So I think the reason why like I read this article and was like kind of interested was actually trying to just see the differences in like basically people saying this has the highest win rate. It's like okay, but like over what sample size, or like are we missing some diamonds in a rough because we're just saying too small of a sample size, So that's kind of like the genesis of this stream. But yeah, so their conclusions here. So like after seeing what you saw for Emerald and Diamond, which again keeping in mind that Emerald Diamond the meta is probably a lot different than Platinum and Open. Basically what they said was we plan to have a smaller restricted list, and each team can only pick just one of them. And then they want to break up the Walrein, Trevenant, Registeel, Sableye party. So that's kind of like their conclusion. So like, do you think after they posted this article, they like released a new ban list, and do you think like that ban list really would break up what they're suggesting here in wanting to break up Walrein, Trevenant, Registeel, and Sableye?
Well, it makes that pretty much impossible, right? Since you can only pick one thing from that list, you can't have both Walrein and Trevenant anymore. No Regitrev, no cores like that. So it'll at least do that. And I think that fewer restrictions will make team building a little bit less complicated. Like you can't, in the last cycle, it was hard to build teams that didn't have 4 things that lost to the same restricted pick. like Altaria, Azu, Reggie, things like that. So
Yeah.
you can build more answers, things like that now.
Okay. Chump says something about we can find their Pidgeot data from Ultra League. So I'm kind of terrified. But why don't we just hop into Ultra League now? Yeah. So
Take a look.
Hopping back up in Ultra League. Okay, so while I'm just kind of spinning the gears, why don't you tell me what you think you're gonna observe in Ultra League?
I'm kind of expecting to see Reggie dominating like it did in Great League.
Okay. Should I let the cat in?
Bring him on stream, yeah.
Bring him on stream. Okay. Well.
Aww.
What do you want? Oh, he wants to meow
Say
in
hi,
here.
Maki.
Say hi, Maki. Come here, boy. Come here. Say hi, Maki. Say hi. Say hi to the stream. All right, you're not data. Get out. Okay.
Toss stuff.
So, this cat's struggling hard. Why is it only showing Talonflame now? What have you done? Oh God!
Deselect flame. Select other bird.
All the burbs. Okay, we're fine. Okay, cool. So, what'd you say about Registeel again?
I expect it to dominate like it did in Great League, like a
Alright,
positive adjusted score.
Yep. That looks used 27% of the time. Normalized win score of 3, which is the highest. Or let me make sure I'm sorting by that. Oh, now I'm sorting for the worst Pokemon. No, go away.
Crest is the whoa. Okay.
No, now I'm sorting alphabetically, which is why Abominus still so good. Yeah, so Registeel is indeed the best, and then followed by Cough, Origin Giratina, which we were talking about early on the stream. And then Shadow Nidoqueen, Venusaur, Skarmory, Alter Giratina. So we can like take a look at this in terms of the visualization here. And so basically, if we just change it over to Ultra.
Skarm is something I did not expect you to say.
Yeah, Skarmory is a number 6. 33 teams used it. And it had a normalized win rate of 1.5. In fact, it's one of the 2 or 3 mons that have both like the confidence interval above that of this line of 0. So
Wow.
you want to guess the you want to guess the other 2 that or I guess I see 3 more. You want to guess the other 3 more that I'm seeing? They're very small sample size usage, so I don't think they're actually good mons.
I'm not sure. Something that's not used very often and is also putting up good win numbers. Like, I don't know.
Crobat used 8
What?
times.
That makes no sense.
Gallade used 5 times.
That makes a little more sense. It's always been good in ULP.
And Shadow Typhlosion used twice.
That's wild.
So some of these numbers obviously are way smaller, and it's like take them with many grains of salt.
Is
but
that
I think
just a really good player playing Spice and doing well with it?
Exactly.
Like
So that's hard. But Skarmory, I think it's like starting to get into that territory where it's like, oh, maybe there's something there. So, I know you played Ultra League for the first half of the season, and I don't know if you had.
And I was pretty bad at it too.
Okay, I was gonna say I don't know if you had like great feelings for it, but I guess one of your teammates and friend of yours, Zokin, did quite well the second half of the season, and I don't know, did he ever end up using Skarmory?
I don't think he did, no.
Okay. Yeah, so kind of interesting. And then, just going through kind of the big dogs, Registeel, Cough, Giratina, that's also another really weird one. That one's actually in that interval where it's like just above the red line. So that so it's within the confidence, or it's like, it's the confidence interval is saying that it's probably something there. It's like it's doing better than average at the very least. Shadow Nidoqueen. Hey, Maki. Venusaur, Politoed, Drapion, Shadow Drapion, Deoxys Defense, so on and so forth. So what Pokemon so far were you expecting but you haven't seen yet, or what Pokemon do you think are going to be in the gutters?
I expected to see Cress higher on the list since it's just really good in Ultra,
Uh-huh.
and we haven't mentioned that yet.
Okay, so Cress.
Stunfisk again. Um, did we say Talonflame? I don't think I heard you mention that one yet either.
Okay, so we got Talonflame, Cress, Stunfisk. So you're basically naming 2/3 of my open Ultra League team right there. I feel attacked.
Yes.
We'll work with that.
Maybe they're in the middle. We'll see.
All right, so let's go down to the other end. Actually, let's see if anywhere in the middle there's like any big points. So big points basically means there's a lot of usage. So Walrein actually did good. It's just, there is some variability there. So we're going to say that it's solid. It's a very solid mon. This next one, same deal here. Pidgeot. So I do want to break out the data for Pidgeot in a bit. Kind of want to see if Chump is a chump. But, Pidgeot did decently, but there's a lot of variability. There's a lot of big wins and a lot of big losses there. Another big one, Greedent. So Shapple's favorite Pokemon. I believe Shapple said something along the lines of, even when it's losing, it's sassy. And I'm like, all right, I like to win, but I mean, it also does some winning too. But then we go down into the dumpsters. So let's start off with this range here. This range is basically saying I'm just below average. There's a big possibility that I'm not actually bad. There's some variability. First one up, Scrafty. So I think Scrafty is just really maybe a couple of charms away from picking a positive normalized win score. Use just enough so that it kind of pulls down that win score, but it's not too bad. Next up, we have Shadow Walrein. So kind of interesting that we see Shadow Walrein lower than that of regular Walrein. Normal Walrein, yeah. So Walrein. So we can sort by this. So this is Shadow Walrein, and we had normal Walrein right here. So normal Walrein comfortably in that positive half of what you'd want, really. Shadow Walrein not doing as hot. It's kind of interesting because I feel like the general heuristic that people have told me is like the Shadow's always better. Shadow's always better. It's like, I don't know.
Especially when it's as spammy as Walrein is, yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of interesting to think. And even here, I wouldn't say this is like a very conclusive data point just because it's like kind of close to that line. In fact, if we kind of go back and look at just the raw numbers.
Like for Nidoqueen, we saw both forms pretty high up, right?
For Nidoqueen, we saw Shadow Nidoqueen pretty high up. I don't know if I saw regular Nidoqueen high up. I'll check for that. But Walrein, it was used 17% of the time, regular Walrein. And Shadow Walrein was used about 11% of the time. And it has like a win score of 1.47. So not too bad, right? But just a little bit below. You're asking about Nidoqueen. Nidoqueen Shadow is used 28% of the time, 27% of the time, has a pretty high win score. And then regular Nidoqueen is actually
a lot worse.
Not a lot worse than Shadow, but like not completely trash. We'll talk about the completely trash Pokemon. So we've gone through all of these kind of not as bad. Ooh, is this right? Yeah, this is Ultra. Talk about some of these not as bad ones. So then now we're getting into the really bad ones. So when I say really bad, what I'm looking for is checking both of these bars, these black bars, are below that of the red line. So that's saying even with that
underperforming,
definitely underperforming. So I guess the first one that I can like see easily is this one right here. So Drifblim, 7 people used it. 7 people should not have used it. Basically, is what this is trying to tell me. This big one right here is Nidoqueen, like we were talking about a bit earlier. Toxicroak gets some usage, not the best, not the worst. This next one here is Snorlax. So some people try to make Snorlax work. Not much.
And this is normal Snorlax.
Normal Snorlax. So let's see if we can find Shadow Snorlax. Shadow Snorlax is... Shadow Snorlax is actually,
that's pretty good.
Not bad, yeah. Normal Snorlax, not as good. And now we can kind of talk about like the 5 worst mons, right? Cresselia is far and away the worst mon in Factions Ultra League, which is bizarre because it's one of the best mons in Open Ultra League. But what this says is 89 teams tried to use it, and it recorded a normalized win score of -3, which is I think in addition to saying like what these numbers are, it's kind of important to think about these numbers in relation to one another. And so you can kind of tell like there's a very long stretch of Pokemon that's just like basically hugging 0, which again makes sense. And then you have Cresselia, which is just a drop off from the next worst mons. And there's like also a big cluster here that's just like a drop off from this next batch of clustered mons. And just kind of like for completeness, the next few mons are Swampert, Talonflame, so definitely not a high performer in Ultra League like it was in Great League. Regirock, 91 Brave Souls brought Regirock. Trevenant, which is 154 people brought.
Mm-hmm.
Galvantula, 92 people brought it. Escavalier, 115 brings. And then Shadow Politoed, and a lot of these are like a little bit smaller, right? So kind of, what do you think is going on in Ultra League that makes Cresselia go from an all-star in GBL to a nobody really in kind of the high tier?
It might just be the meta. Like we're seeing Reggie really strong. We're seeing ghost types like Cofagrigus being in Giratina Altered being pretty powerful too.
Yeah, Reggie.
So if those
Cough.
things are, if they're being brought a lot and they're doing well, it makes sense that other common picks that lose to them, like Cress, aren't doing as well.
Yeah, but there seems to be at least enough for Crest to kind of have some target. So if we go back and we sort the data by not win rate but usage rate, let's kind of play that exercise and see where that takes us. So we sort by usage rate. Then what this tells us is the number 1 most used mon was Shadow Nidoqueen, followed by Registeel. Pidgeot was used actually a lot, even though Pidgeot did not. Pidgeot did okay, but Pidgeot was used the 3rd most out of all the other mons. Politoed, which seems like a decent matchup for Cress. Trevenant, not great. Nidoqueen, not great. Cough,
great.
Obstagoon, Talonflame, Greedent, pretty bad. Walrein, Escavalier, which is absolutely terrifying. And Shadow Machamp, which is absolutely terrifying if they hit you with a payback, which I've had happen to me once.
Yep.
And Scrafty and Galvantula. So like honestly, like
there aren't a lot of targets in there for it. There's the Walrus, okay. Politoad's a good matchup too, but lots of things it doesn't.
Scrafty's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Scrafty's fine. Obstagoon is fine too, I think.
Yeah.
So it's kind of this one's really, this one's like kind of like my personal prize cow. So I'm like,
here.
Yeah, it's like kind of curious that there's not a lot of targets, but like Cresselia never has like tons of targets to begin with, and it does fine like going into Registeel's day in and day out. Well, I mean like not the actual Registeel, like everything around the Registeel. So it's kind of curious to see that at least in Factions Ultra League for cycle or season 2 cycle 1 that Cresselia is so bad.
And so when we say bad, we're not saying that you can't win with it. We're saying that a lot of the time it's posting like 1-2s, getting swept. There are some positive Crest games in here, right?
Correct. Yeah. So I'm not saying that you can't win with it. And in fact, like a lot of this data here, it's never saying that you can't win with a mon. You can win with anything. Especially because we're not considering if you use them on, right? Because we're just considering, is it part of your team of 6 when you did well or not? It's just the hope there is that through kind of this like bulk analysis of the data, you get a little bit of insight. So I'm not saying anything about like Crest is unplayable, but it's like Crest did not feature in winning teams, I guess is the more appropriate way of saying that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so any other Pokemon you want to look at in Ultra League before we move on to Master League? Or let's move on to Master League. We can talk about all the analysis, and then maybe we can go back to like what Silph has said and see if what we saw today matched up.
Let's do it.
All right, so let's go to Master. So we're gonna do the same exercise again. Now this time, a Master, if I remember correctly, it was a lot more polarizing. So before we were talking about normalized win scores of 3 being really good or -3 being really bad. In Master, what I found was there's like kind of steep drop-offs. And so I'm not 100% sure, like I'd really have to sit down and think about that, but I think the higher the normalized win score, the more polarizing like meta, polarizing or like kind of like, you know, cream of the crop meta there is, like a very close or closed meta. And so if we look at the top performers, this one, I don't know what it is, but I think it's Melmetal. It is indeed Melmetal. So
Usage, yeah.
Sorry?
Yeah, in terms of just usage, I think that might have been the most used mon in the format.
Yeah. It's the
It's
best.
really good. Good now.
Yeah. Next up, Zekrom. So at the time, I believe unrestricted.
Mm-hmm.
Therian Landorus. At the time,
Same.
unrestricted. Or I still unrestricted? I don't quite remember.
I'm not sure about the next season or next cycle.
Yeah. Next up, Garchomp. Also unrestricted. So basically, all these are just stat sticks, unrestricted, pseudo-legendary, or legendary mons. The first thing is Origin Giratina. So I think that's actually the first one that actually is, you know.
That is limited, yeah.
Yeah. So Windy's kind of foretelling something. He's saying he wouldn't expect Zacian to land where it did, and we'll talk about that in a bit. And then so we have Dialga doing pretty good, Kyogre, Yveltal, and then Snorlax. So this kind of like makes up the core. These are mons that did solid, and you can also tell that the air bars are quite large. So unlike in open a Great League and open Ultra League, where we were just saying these mons, I you can't argue against them. They're good. Like, you know, here it's like you can say, yeah, Melmetal did really well. Yeah, a lot of people used it, but it had some stinkers of games tossed in there too. So, you know, like it could lose on a given day. It's not saying it's the most busted thing ever. It's just like more often than not, if you were winning, you had a Melmetal. Is basically what it's saying, right?
Right. What are those low usage ones before Snorlax?
Right here. So we have
Yeah.
Shadow Metagross used 6 times,
Okay.
put up a decent score. Conqueror used 3 times, put up an okay score. I think someone memed and got a 3-0 with it, which definitely helped. So not putting too much stock
Okay.
into it.
I remember that one from the Silph graphic. It had like a 100% win rate in Diamond or something.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like here, if I just kill the Diamond, do I see Conqueror? Conqueror is. So yeah, it might have been something else. It might have been actually Diamond, yeah, because this is Emerald. So we'll look at Diamond Emerald. Yeah, and then so this next one is Altered Giratina, so a lot of usage, a lot of wins and losses, so on and so forth. And then I think one thing I'm kind of curious about is where's Mewtwo? Mewtwo, where you at? Mewtwo that's Shadow Mewtwo. Mewtwo actually did not do too hot. Wow. So Mewtwo was used 365 times and picked up a normalized win score of about -1. While we're here in the gutters, the worst mon was Sylveon. Used 69 times. I think Prima, out of all the Charmers, I think Primo's the one that got the positive win score.
It seems the best to me. It's more versatile. And, okay.
Yeah, it's still lower. Togekiss?
Where's Togekiss?
No, all of those 3 big ones are all negative, so don't use Charmers.
Noted.
Excadrill. So Excadrill is really interesting because I feel like you almost always wanted to use Excadrill, and then it just didn't do what you wanted it to do. You're like, all right, I need a Dialga counter, and then you just get it on a Mewtwo. And you're like, all right, this is still fine, but the Mewtwo's 1 cycle cut ahead. Yeah, it's not great, but the Mewtwo was 1 cycle cut ahead, and now I'm very dead. You know, like it's kind of like that. So Uzo says Charmers were terrible in his opinion, which the data bears out, right? Like, you know, you kind of see that. Metagross, pretty low. Gyarados. So Gyarados, I think, was one of the biggest sufferers of the new change, allowing for
You can bring more legendaries now.
Well,
and that pushes non-legendaries aside a little bit.
That too, but also coupled with the fact that number 1, who kind of got off of the ban list more or less, Melmetal, completely crushed Gyarados whenever anybody wanted to bring Gyarados.
And you've got Zekrom up there too, which is not fun for Gary.
Yeah. So then coming up, we have Swampert, Mewtwo, like we talked about. Tapu Bulu, tried using that a couple times. At least the Devon Stonks did, I think. Zacian is kind of like the biggest kind of suffer here. It's kind of interesting because, everyone's going gaga over Zacian. People are still going gaga over Zacian right now because it's in raids. But at least in factions, it didn't do that well. So this is actually kind of a fun time to, like, we talked a bit about, like, the different regions. We can also talk about the different tiers and see how Zacian did. So I'm going to go back to data breakdown because it's a little bit easier to see where things change very rapidly. And I'm going to look at master. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just turn on all the tiers except for diamond and emerald.
So I'd expect to see more non-legendaries the lower you go, right?
Well, we'll see about that. So I'll sort once again by normalized win score. And what this says is Melmetal, Zekrom are still top dogs. Mewtwo actually kind of picks up. And, like, maybe that's just one of those things where Mewtwo's stat product just can overpower those more, non-legendaries. And we can look up Zacian and see if that gets any usage. Kind of the biggest one I want to look at. And Zacian actually still, it does a little better. So it has a win score of 1.49, a normalized win score of minus 0.15. It was used 13% of the time, so it wasn't, like, not used at all. But it's still kind of negative, which is pretty surprising, right? Like, you would think, oh, maybe Zacian, like, maybe people just know how to play against Zacian now. But, like, if you go lower in the tier, like, people know, like, people get wrecked by Zacian. But it doesn't really look to be the case that way. So kind of a little sojourn aside, we can go back to the data. And basically, it's a very, very, very small meta. And honestly, you saw, like, how long those stupid spreadsheets were when I looked at Great League, when I looked at Ultra League. This is, like, just, it's on the window right here. There's no scroll bar. Like, so it's a very condensed small meta. And I think those condensed small metas really lead to having higher and lower normalized win scores. So anything else that you like, any mons you want to, like, highlight really quickly, or any kind of, like, thoughts about what we're seeing in this meta here? Is this, like, exactly what you expected based off of watching, your team play, watching some other recaps of Open, Master League, and Factions?
Yeah, that makes sense. I think your point about a small meta leading to more variance is right. Like, when you've got all the same mons being played, a lot of it comes down to alignment.
Yeah. And I think you also get very punished when you bring mons outside of that core meta, right? So, like, every time you brought a Sylveon, you brought it into the 15 bajillion Melmetals you were going to see, you're like, yep, I messed up. Like, that's kind of how it came down. Yeah, so now we get to talk about kind of the two more interesting ones, in my opinion, that of the fields, because, Great Ultra Master, you can get some sort of an insight from GBL. Is the insight correct? Maybe not. Like, we saw Cresselia did very poorly, but you have, like, some guiding principles, and then you can just say, oh, this was surprising, or oh, this I expected. Going in to the two fields, it's a little bit harder to say what's good or what's not. You just kind of, like, play it out and see what happens, right? And I think based on my team, it turned out that at least they thought Colony really coalesced around a very big core 6 or 7 very, very rapidly. And people thought Alchemy was a little bit more open, but the play patterns were still pretty repetitive, right? So let's look at Colony first. So Colony, basically, I can say, I would say these 7 mons, without even knowing what they are, I'm going to say it's just what my teammates told me were the core 7. So the first,
Samurott, Excadrill, some water.
So Samurott, Beedrill, Politoed. Beedrill's on here. So maybe the Beedrill's kind of like the little hiding, the little diamond in the rough, right? But Samurott, Politoed, Excadrill, Cresselia, Sandslash, Alola. So that's 5. Pinsir had a very, very high win rate. I know my team did not use Pinsir that much.
That was one of Chapo's favorites.
Yeah, I know Chapo used it to great effect. Wendy says he always suspected that Quagsire sucked. Yeah, Quagsire is actually this one right here. Quagsire's right here. Yeah, we'll talk about this stuff later on. But here, as again, you can kind of see the normalized win scores not as high. So I think the more I'm trying to remember exactly how this works, but essentially, like, it's not as high, but you can still see that error bar kind of reaching high up. So a lot more variance there. You mentioned there's like Flygon, Gastrodon, Magnezone, Empoleon, Rainy Castform, and then after that, it's like everything kind of drops off. So is this pretty much where you would expect to see the best mons?
Yeah, a lot of the stuff that's core meta is in the top of the graph there.
Yeah. All right. So after this, you get a lot of little spice picks. The one thing that kind of sticks out in the middle, like almost like an island in a sea of two excellent and really crappy mons, is that of Mew. So I didn't remember seeing our team use Mew that much. I don't know if the Stars use Mew.
Yeah, it had a bit of play for us and for some of our opponents. It's always nice in these formats since you can TM to whatever moves that you make sense.
Yeah. It seems like it did just okay, right? And also, like, if you'll notice, these numbers are just a lot bigger because you had double the usage. And so Windy
Yep.
brought up something interesting. He said Mew trailed off as the weeks went on for us. So I can actually track and see, mostly because he didn't have TLs. So we can actually we'll track and see that. We'll like do first half, second half, and just see like the usage rates. That's kind of another cool thing I can do here. But let's talk about the poor performers. We'll start here. So Levany, I think, was an early pick for something that might be very interesting. And I think very rapidly people were like, "No, this thing sucks." I guess 287 teams did not get the memo, but that's basically what it says there. I don't know if you guys use Levany, but I don't even know what moves it has. It has what, like Fury Cutter?
It's a grass bug, so you can bring it into Munch on a Malamar or Cress, and it can handle water types too. So it's got a niche, but it's not great.
Yeah. Next up was Hypno. I'm not going to talk about Hypno. I'm not going to give Leo the satisfaction. Galvantula. I think that got some use there, but coming up here, like you're hitting the Cresselia, fine. You're hitting the Politoed, fine, or whatever water type. Samurott, you're hitting pretty good. So like it actually has quite a few targets in these like top few.
I'm surprised to see it so low. Like a lot of teams we use were pretty weak to it.
Yeah, maybe it's just like people that brought the Galvantula were just like not really getting those weak teams. Like like they're bringing it like into the Excadrill life or Excadrill Sansalash Alola life. But it does seem like a lot of these top mons are somewhat weak to it, so kind of interesting. And this again here, like I will caution in that yes, it has a negative normalized win score, but that error bar is so large it could have like been right here for all we know, right? It's not set in stone. The next few mons, however, are a lot worse. Parasect, I don't know why. Frostlass came in with like about 181 teams using it, and it just could not really get anywhere. I mean, like, what are we targeting here? I guess did it beat up on Samurott, or did it?
That's got to be pretty close, I'd have to think.
Yeah. It probably loses to Excadrill. Cresselia,
It'll be
probably
Cress,
beat, yeah.
that's fine.
Gets crushed by it. Gets crushed by it, yeah. So I think it's like one of these. This is the interesting about factions where it's like we can say that Frostlass made more sense when it seemed like a bug meta. So yeah, that makes sense. Like we can talk about this in terms of Frostlass sucks, but like it really depends on how the meta shakes out, right? Like in a vacuum, Frostlass is pretty powerful. In fact, like if the meta shook out a different way, maybe Frostlass would have done better. But just from looking at the data, like week in and week out, when people threw in Frostlass, like what happened? This is what happened. Now the last two, Quagsire, which I guess just didn't really get there. Probably because the moves were just so slow, is what I'm guessing.
Yeah, it felt like a lot of games came down to whoever had energy on something fast, like Politoed, Excadrill, Samurott, and Quag just can't keep up.
Yeah, exactly. And then drumroll, please, for Windy specifically. In last place, very, very far away from the 0 line, is Malamar.
Well,
so,
clearly these fake data.
Fake data. Malamar was used 338 times and just could not really get anywhere. And okay, I'm gonna make this caveat right now. Bernabas, your captain, known aficionado of Malamar has said that Malamar is a really hard mon to use, and it has a lot of situations where it can actually do well. So again, this data doesn't really tell you how good someone can use a mon. Like the Talonflames of the world, I think Talonflame is actually a great example where it's like it looked bad in North America, but like some people like just wrecked face with it still in North America. Like it's very hard to just say like, yeah, mon's bad or good just by looking at data. But this is saying if you were an average Joe and you're like, I am not like the best Malamar player in the world, and you're like, should I use Malamar? I would
Probably not. This
probably
says,
not unless you're playing us. Then please do so. But yeah, so pretty small meta, all things considered. I think that was kind of like an interesting point to make. Quag looks so good week 1, but water resist ended up being so valuable. Yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense. Like it's kind of funny because you would think that ground typing would be useful, right? Like the Galvantulas of the world. Like if you can get hit, if you can get like Galvantula is in here, right? Yeah, Galvantula. Like if Quagsire can beat up on a Galvantula, that's great. But like if Galvantula sucks and people don't want to use it, or like people are just benching their Galvantula, then Quagsire loses a lot of that viability, right? And so, any last thoughts here?
yeah, can we check this out by time period, like early and
By time
late,
period?
just to see our
Yeah,
change?
great. So let's do again data breakdown, just because I think the numbers are a little bit easier to see if you're not looking by normalized win count. We'll sort by count or percentage; they're the same thing, and we'll actually change it to the right format because we're looking at master right now. But apparently,
Mewtwo and Colony, all right.
Melmodo was used 70% of all Master League faction battles in Diamond and Emerald. Just putting that out there. In Colony, it's loading. It's loading. It's loading. It's loaded. All right. In terms of usage, this is also really fun to look at. But in terms of usage, Excadrill, Crest, Sandslash, Samurott, Galvantula, Quagsire, Politoed, Pinsir. Those are kind of all up in there.
Mm-hmm.
If we do it to the first half, so let's say bouts 1 to 5. Take a little load. We have Sandslash being about. I think this is not gonna say. This is like percentage of like all 9. So it's not gonna say the right numbers, but we can just like look at the ordering, right? Like Alolan Sandslash, Cresselia, Excadrill, Samurott, Galvantula, Quagsire, Malamar, Politoed.
Crag.
So like
Mew.
yeah. So slightly more Mew, slightly more. And if we look at the second half, so let's say 6 to 9. We have Excadrill, Crest, Samurott, Sandslash, Galvantula, Politoed, Quagsire. Mew kind of drops down a
Malamar
bit.
drops a bit too, yeah.
Malamar drops a bit too, so yeah. So you can actually, and I don't end up doing this because, all things considered, the data is still not that big, especially if you're trying to like say I want to look at the diamonds and the emeralds, you're just like cutting yourself off of a lot of data points. It's like what 30, it's like 10 factions, 20 teams.
10 teams in each, yeah.
Yeah, so 20 teams. So it's like 20 data points per bout per region and tier. So like you get 80 per region tier if you're talking about Diamond, Emerald, and the 4 regions. So it's like still not a lot of data, really. But that being said, you kind of see like Mew drop off a little bit. Maybe Windy's responsible for Mew dropping off a bit. People still try to use their Quagsires. People failed using their Quagsires. Pretty bad win score. And you can also like even like compare the win scores, I think. So Quagsire 1.44, and then if you look at the first 5, it was 1.48, and then so if you look at the last 4, Quagsire went down to 1.37.
Normalized win score is
yeah
a lot worse in the second.
Yeah, so you can kind of see that it's dropping off there. Yep, A-Slash and Samurott became so dominant as time went on, and like we can also check that, right? Like so Samurott and what do you say, Politoed, A-Slash, yep. A-Slash. So A-Slash actually kind of had like a slightly negative win rate, but that's like, it's within error, right? But these two for the second half, and then the first half, it like started off pretty good actually. So I don't know like if you can say like they became more dominant. Maybe they like in terms of usage, like maybe they just like went up a lot in usage. But like their win scores about the same, right? Yeah. All right. So last uh field, which is Wendy's favorite because Wendy destroyed everybody who played this field except for like maybe Jay's man or something like that. I don't remember. Is Alchemy. So I put up the data already, but what do you think about Alchemy, like based off of what you saw?
I didn't play this very much myself or Scrim, so I don't know very much about it, but it seemed like it was a lot of Deoxys and Ghosts. Um, a bit of ice types in there too, the Alolan Sand Slash, the Frost Lass.
Yeah. So there's one mon that is above the rest, and that is Shadow Dragonite. I actually remember this. Like I think
Really?
Shadow Dragonite had just an absurd win rate when you were up a shield or something like that. You could, in fact, Dragon Breath down the cough and like use one shield or something like that. That's like what someone told me, and that like got you a lot of the way. Like you had to dodge the Sand
The Sand
Slash, I
Slash.
think, but everything else like the Stun Fisk or everything, you just Dragon Breath it down, and like you would leave with a lot of energy. You'd get switch. You would get the shield back when you tossed your Dragon Claw because they couldn't afford to eat a Shadow.
It could be a Draco.
Yeah, it could be a Draco. Could be an Outrage. Could be anything. Could be a Shadow or it could be a Dragon Claw. The next one up was Sand Slash Alola. So multi-format menace. Shadow Ninetales. So there was actually a really interesting discussion that I had with you about, or with some of my teammates actually, about Shadow Ninetales versus regular Ninetales. And kind of like, they actually went back and forth as the weeks went on. I kind of plotted in the data. Yeah. Whitney says, Dragonite was hard checked by 3 mods and only 2 of them were super viable. Yeah.
So what, just from A Slash?
Probably A Slash was one of them, yeah. Stunfisk is next. Ninetales, you see Ninetales and Shadow Ninetales both did pretty well at the end of the day. Cough, I think was A9 a part of this meta?
I don't think so.
Okay, well, we'll see. Oranguru, which, man, that animation's the dumbest animation I've ever seen.
It's a good mon, though.
Flygon.
King Bart's favorite.
A Slash and DD. Sand Slash, very interesting. DD coming up. So a little bit more kind of like a wider range of mons that I feel like were viable, really, you know. And then I think Polymer's, wow, Polymer's actually showing up here. Hey, Luke, thanks for the subscription. Polymer's actually this is really interesting because like we have Polymers here who is the Senate more or less, right? When it comes to the metas. But yeah, he mentioned that Drill set the tempo at 10 turns to your charge move, and Quag was just a little bit too slow. Ice and Water Resist were also key to Toad and Rainy Cast Form out competing it. So definitely makes sense there. So now we're talking about Alchemy here. And so those are pretty much it. Those are like your top mons. Even here in Alchemy, you really notice that there's not like the crap mons where they're all dropping off. Like everything is like pretty much closer to this line. And I feel like I don't know if that's like a good way of saying this is a good meta versus this is a bad meta, but it seems like here at least like things were a lot closer is what I'm trying to say.
There's more viable picks, it seems like. There's fewer things that are totally trash.
Yeah, well, we can talk about the totally trash. Polymer loved Shadow Dragonite. Yeah, a lot of people loved it. Enough to say, you know, like it comfortably was the best mon. The standard errors looked pretty good for it. The worst mon, on the other hand, we had Steelix. And I think this is something that people at first said, oh, Steelix might be pretty good. Like, you know, it resists Shadow Dragonite. It I don't know how it does against, probably not good against Sand Slash Alola. Like, probably not good against that too. I'm starting to see why Steelix wasn't very good by the end of it.
What do you bring it to beat, right? I mean, it's gonna beat
doesn't
Dragon,
beat that.
but
does it beat Cough?
I don't think so. The Crunch is super effective, but it's
beats
tanky,
the Sage Pokemon, as apparently it's called. Oranguru. It's the Sage Pokemon, so I should like it, but it's weird. Doesn't beat Flygon, does it? Doesn't.
It should.
Right? It does? Okay.
I think so.
I don't know. I believe you. It's just like I'm literally every time it's like typing effectiveness. I don't
It
know
probably
who
depends
does
on
what.
the moveset, right? Like Mudshot, Earth Power versus Dragon Tail.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Sand slash. Yeah, DT. Yeah, it doesn't really look like it has a lit Leo. Oh god. Looks like it had not a lot of room to play with there. And then I think Windy asked, he's curious to see what the data says about Trev, so I can just kind of punch that in there right now.
It felt like it was pretty popular.
Trevenant near the bottom was used 211 times, and it had a pretty negative win rate, but you know, like still within error, Wendy says Steelix suffered from Euphis, K9, and DD mostly. Well, yeah,
Lots of
that's a
counters.
lot of that, yeah. Some other mons here, Alola Marowak, Cargo. I feel like we've tried using that. Regular Dragonite, you can kind of see some people try to use it. Very, very different results than that of Shadow Dragonite. Like that, having that extra damage was really important. And I think most of the times, like, you had to shield anyway, so it didn't really matter. The damage you're taking from fast moves, I think was kind of the logic there. Knocked Owl, the score, Needle Queen. I think it's Gligar. No, Frostlass. Kind of pretty big usage, but overall a pretty tight meta. I think. I'm sorry, a pretty like tightly around 0 normalized win score, and just a lot of mons that were viable, and a lot of mons, even though like they weren't as viable, they still had game. They could still be played.
Where is the hippo on this list?
The hippo. All right. How do you even spell hippo? Hippo dot one. So the regular hippo, not a lot of usage, 28 data points, but slightly above. And then the shadow one is right here, slightly below. No, slightly above, but there's like three.
Basically average.
Yeah, so not a lot of usage, but didn't hurt people when they used it, basically. Yeah. So let's see. We talked about Trev, and yeah. So I think that's pretty much all I had on the docket. So what we can do is either field data. Okay, so yeah. Polymer asked a really good question. So did I look at the data longitudinally at all? Felt like K9 was more popular earlier, and pokes like Berserker and Guru came on late. So I don't have like a clean way to look at it longitudinally, but we can sort of like MacGyver our way to looking at that. So what I can do is sort by the first, let's say the first 5 bouts, and we can sort by again actually I'm wondering what
the count of teams, right?
Yeah, the count of teams. I'm trying to remember what function I had. Well, that's fine. We can do this. So the count of teams, the first 5 mons. Let's see. We have Stunfisk, Cough, Sandslash, Shadow Ninetales, DD, Sandslash, Ninetales down here. So if we like take the 2 Ninetales, they probably comprise about, you know, like if you added these 2 together, I would put it at, oh my god, like 3rd place. So
yeah, it looks about right.
About 3rd. And then if we look at the second half, so about 6 to 9, we see Ninetales, 106, 334, that's 340, 440. So I would still say that Ninetales like didn't really drop off in popularity. I don't know, like
it was consistently picked pretty often.
Yeah.
I see Oranguru there near the top now.
Yeah, so Guru right here, 114. If we kind of look at Guru from Guru, this is more
68.
bouts. Yeah, 68. So more bouts.
And less usage.
So I think Guru kind of like came in pretty late, and honestly, that's like something that I would love to look at. So the 2 major kind of suggestions, or A, can you look at cores? B, can you look at longitudinally, like what's going on? The downside with looking at longitudinally, especially for like all the data that I'm like showing today at least, is that you're already working with really small sample sizes, and then you start talking about like what happens bout by bout. And then that like data is like there's variance, right? Like I don't know, someone sneezed funny one day and they like decided to go for Mad Cargo instead of Ninetales. Like it's hard to gauge what's signal and what's noise from that small data size. But you know, if you like start clustering them into like, you know, bouts of 1 to 5, bouts 6 to 9, then I think that's like pretty valid. Another, what's the other mon? Berserker, yeah.
So was that 68 before, like similar to Guru?
Yeah, so Berserker 98, 68. So it went from 30 to so 98 for Berserker. And then we look at just the second half. Berserker had 40. So I think it dropped off a little bit, actually. Seemed like that. Yeah. I will say this, Polymer. At least from my understanding from looking at what my teammates were saying, it felt like they thought Colony was solved very quickly, and
Yes.
and that they thought it was pretty stale. I know I don't think Alchemy came down to that. Like I think I didn't get the vibe that people were kind of like, yeah, you just run the same 7 mons. Like there was like a little bit of variation, and it seemed like as a result, gameplay probably was a little bit more interesting, at least like from the team building perspective. I do think my teammates said that Colony, like the gameplay was fine, like it was pretty good. It was just you play the 6 mons, and you just play them week in and week out. But yeah, we actually looked at Colony, and you can actually just pick out what the best mons were, just because it was like these are the best mons. Like if you pick something else outside of this, you have to have a really good reason. So Pinsir, Samurott, Beedrill, Politoed, Excadrill, Cresselia, Sansash. Yeah, no. I think Leo like did not run the meta team until like maybe bout 3, and he was like, "Why did I not run the meta team?"
Meta is good, and even small
Balk,
meta isn't bad.
yeah, and then not Balk, Burnibus was like, you know, running a little more off the beaten path, and then by the very end, he was just like, I'm not running this crap. I'm running this meta 6. Yeah. Alchemy had more flavor. Colony was fun gameplay. It looked fun. It looked like Samurott being a stud. It was pretty interesting. Mew and Torterra.
That's wild.
Torterra? Not Torterra wasn't the worst.
Not bad.
Torterra fell in this very large range of mons that were like, you can bring them, I guess. Yeah. Okay. Should I don't want to put Burno on blast, but I'm gonna put Burno on blast. No, I love Burno too much. But we can actually look at individual people, so that's kind of like a cool thing. I'm gonna need to back out a little bit here. Maybe we can like spend some time talking about that. Maybe not putting people on blast. Let's see. Let's put Winnie on blast because Winnie doesn't care. Winnie's out. He has no skin in the game. But I can kind of set this up and look at player records.
He's leaving as he goes on blast. All right.
He's leaving. Peep the VOD. Okay, we can talk crap about Wendy all we want. So another cool thing about having all this data is that you can also like see who did the best in, you know, their respective fields. And yeah, and what was I gonna say? Like, you know, obviously, what's his name? Nero. I forget the last 3 letters, but he does a great job of collating every single match and figuring out who like the standout performers. So I talked to him a little bit about this stuff. Unfortunately, I don't have it as easy way of showing the best players, but you can kind of like see, let's say for Master. And so the filters here are Season 2, Cycle 1, Emerald tier, and I think this is just North America.
Just Emerald.
Just Emerald, just North America. And so let's just start by player wins. So this is looking at Master, and Uzo had the most wins. I think my Sakurajima had slightly higher win percentage, but like it was pretty close near the top. And so like you can kind of see things like that. You can also see individual team lookup. So essentially what each person brought for Pokemon. So Leo is actually a great example of the meta. But essentially Leo started off being a little bit spicier, you know, a little bit over the place. and then rapidly converged into this core 6. So
Just play
Sand
the,
Slash.
the meta team.
Yeah, he played
I love it.
Galvantula, which is actually really interesting because as we noticed, Galvantula, he said it was a meta, but like it was slightly negative, right? But like still, like it did work for him. Samurott, Excadrill, Cresselia, Politoed. No more Mew afterwards. No more Quagsire. It's like, you know, that scene from The Incredibles. No capes, no Mews. So yeah, we can actually look up some other players. Balk, do you want to be put on blast?
Sure, why not?
Okay. Balk88. And so Balk, oh my god, this makes things a lot worse because you have all your.
Oh yeah,
together.
I did 2 leagues. You're gonna see a lot of weird stuff here.
All right, let's do Ultra. Let's do Ultra because you did a great time in Ultra. Actually, let's not do Ultra.
Yes, amazing. Look at that. 0-3, 1-2.
Let's do great.
Beautiful.
All right, so in Great League, you are the reason why I have so many error, like why my error bars are so wide, or like my standard deviation is so wide. You're feast or famine right here, feast or famine. But it seems like aside from Trevenant and Talonflame and G-Fizz, you were pretty much all over the place there. You picked a lot of different things. Now I'm wondering Windy did a lot of Alchemy. And so we can look at Windy. He did not do any Great League, which is why it doesn't show anything. But Windy did quite a bit, and he focused on that U-Fisk, A/, Shadow Ninetales, Shadow Dragonite, Deoxys Defense, and a little bit of Trevenant. Yeah. Hey, Keen Bart, thanks for coming out. Oh, we can look up Keen. Keen's not gonna be put on blast, right? Because Keen like just dominated, right?
There'll be a Flygon on every team, guaranteed.
Let's see. You're correct. There's no. Ooh.
Oh.
Week 9, he did not bring a Flygon.
So close.
But aside from that, yes, he brought Flygon 8 times. Shadow Ninetales 7 times. Hippo's. I'm surprised Keen did not single-handedly bring up the score of Hippo. Cough, Stunfisk, Berserker, Alolan Marowak, and then a bunch of stuff. Oranguru came in a little bit later. So yeah. So I think it's pretty cool to really break down the meta especially after the fact, and like really see what the data is. Obviously, the Silph write-up is complementary to what we looked at here today because they have more data that we don't. And Keen, you missed the cool part. Now we're just like hyping you up now. That's why you're saying this is cool. But sorry, what I was saying like just really interesting to see how the meta shapes up after the fact and really compared to like what Silph says. And I think, you know, I'm gonna hop over to what the Silph screen is showing, and I'm gonna share that with you, Balk. But something interesting to note is like a lot of our analysis today, we looked at just Emerald and Diamond, all tiers. But there's a lot of difference between Emerald and Diamond and the rest of the tiers. You know, it kind of makes sense because different availabilities, you know, different, you know, like not everybody has a Metacham, or like, I guess Metacham is a bad example, but like maybe everybody just has a Metacham and not other stuff, and they want to use their Metacham. So it's like there's very different metas between the different tiers, and I think breaking it down to Emerald Diamond versus everything else is kind of like a first rough pass. And you really can't get more granular than that without like really losing a lot of statistical significance. And even here, like a lot of the data we talked about, it's like, you know, this looks bad, but it could have been good. We don't know. But yeah, so I think seeing this made me really interested in actually like having a video going through the data and just maybe not even analyzing it by myself, or just like displaying the data so that someone who's much more knowledgeable than I am can tell me what the data means. What does it all mean? Yeah, so we still have about like 20 minutes or so, at least for the time that I budgeted. So if anybody had any random questions about, you know, maybe who's the best performer in some tier or some region, or what Pokemon was the best, you know, like I'd love to answer those questions. Balk, if you have any of those questions too, maybe that we didn't cover, I'd love to kind of go over them as well.
Yeah, like just what you mentioned before about differences between tiers. I kind of think that we'd see the most differences in the less accessible formats like Masters and Ultra.
Yeah.
Maybe we can see what the standouts are in the lower tiers for one of those.
Yeah, that's actually a really great question. So I'm gonna go back to this display here. Apparently, I made this. This is the only display that has big fonts. I don't know why. Thank you, Tableau. But let's talk about master. I'm a little bit more familiar with master, so I'll kind of touch base there. And we want basically, let's look at all the tiers except for diamond and emerald. And so what I like doing when I do this is first, let's look at the standouts. So Melmetal, Melmetal is like the perfect combination of accessible and busted and unrestricted. Zekrom recently came out.
That was high there too.
Recently
Okay, so it's doing a lot better in the lower tiers.
Kyogre, also I think at that time recently came out. Groudon, which is kind of interesting. Did Groudon also come out with Kyogre? I don't remember.
I think they were in raids around the same time, but it's been a while.
Okay, so Groudon came out. And then Prima, that Charmer, really goes up there.
Okay, that's interesting. It was at the bottom in the higher tiers, but in the lower tiers, it's one of the best performers.
Yeah. Keenbart. I don't know if this is something you can pull off now, but I'm interested to see the biggest differential between PB poke ranking and performance. I don't think I can do it, mainly because I think my brain would break trying to do that, and I think my CPU would break if I opened another browser. But if you have like a more constrained question, like maybe you can ask me in any of our Discord servers, and like I'd be very interested in look at that as well. But even PB poke rankings don't really play out with what reality plays out as, so I don't know how much weight I put there. Yeah. Yabado. And then let's just look at the crappers. A lot of people brought Gyarados. A lot of people brought Gyarados. And I think, again, with that Gyarados, Melmetal kind of, dynamic.
It's accessible and it has the stats, so it's a good choice, but didn't do well here.
Machamp, Lugia, Excadrill. Excadrill is kind of like annoyingly not as accessible as you would think, but still relatively accessible. Altered Giratina, Togekiss, so not all Charmers are made the same. And then just a bunch of random things.
Ice
So
types. Ice types, yeah.
And then kind of Dialga. So interestingly, I think Dialga did much worse in the lower tiers than they did in the higher tiers. So I don't know if that's just because of what's going on here. So nothing here like strikes me as like a Dialga counter standout. Maybe the Prima's not.
Groudon, the Melmetal, but Lando.
Yeah. It might actually have something to do with like people just bringing a lot of Machamps. Maybe I don't know. That's kind of interesting actually. So that's kind of an interesting data point where Dialga just did exactly average. Metagross gets a lot more usage in the lower leagues. And Snorlax gets a lot more usage in the lower leagues. I wonder if there's a Shadow Snorlax. Shadow Snorlax gets some pretty decent usage as well. Yeah. And then what's the other one you said? Open? Or Ultra?
Yeah, Ultra.
So in Ultra, we see Cough doing the best. So
wow.
Cough is actually pretty hard to make, right?
Yeah, you would have to have grinded for that one during the Halloween event since it's only out.
Kept it because you didn't get guaranteed XLs by that time? I guess you did. I guess you could have. So
they had bonus XLs for walking then, I think, so it wasn't that difficult.
Yeah. Altered Giratina.
Makes sense.
Yeah, who's this? Max plays MTG. Hey, Max! Oh my god. Great to see you out, man. Max is actually someone I know from playing Magic, and so it's like kind of worlds collide. But Max is a great person who really helped run a lot of super awesome Magic tournaments. But yeah, no, like I got a free copy of Tableau because I was gonna leave school soon. I was like, I should probably get my free copy of Tableau now. So I've just been messing around with Pokemon Go data. So that's pretty fun. Toxicroak, Greedent, Walrein. I think it's like more or less the same mons you would expect, right? Like nothing.
We had Toxie lower in the higher tiers, right?
Yeah, we did. Yeah. Yep.
But Reggie is still really good.
Let's see on the lower end. Nidoqueen, Charizard, Surfetch, Talonflame. So I think all in all.
Cress?
Cress?
Where's Cresselia here?
Grass, where are we at? Where are we at, homegirl? Oh my god!
That's
She's
pretty
above
good.
average. She's above average. Everything else sucks. But yeah, like I think. Wait, is that a Raichu? What the fuck?
Kanto
Alright.
Raichu? Okay,
Yeah.
that's pretty cool.
All right. Well, that's interesting. But honestly, like it seems like in Ultra at least, like there wasn't like that huge of a availability, and even in Master, you know, aside from like a little bit overrepresentation of like the more recent legendaries, didn't really seem like that huge of a differential there either. So maybe with all these recent rates, it's like kind of bouncing out a little bit. I don't know if you agree or disagree with that analysis there.
It certainly helps. Like you still have problems with things like the mythicals, but
Yeah.
putting things like Zacian back in raids is great.
Yeah. Oh, speaking of mythicals, you know, I don't know if this counts as putting someone on blast. I am curious about, say, Zarude, not an Alchemy, because I don't think I really hope it doesn't show up there.
The Rude and Great League. All right.
It's used 5 times in Master League, and if I so desired, I can see who used Zarude's.
I know one person has one and actually did just raid for enough rare candies, which is wild.
Yeah, I saw that. Kelmick, that was insane. I don't think I could ever do that. But oh my god, this is gonna break. What's the best way to do
Is
this?
Mewtwo? Can we filter by Zarude?
I'm trying to filter by Zarude. Oh, it's Zarude. There we go. So, so Kelmick used it once. I think he used it against us actually. Dijon the Jin, which is another. I think he's a Michigan. He's on
Ann Arbor. Yep.
Ann Arbor, the cycle winners. Also very into grinding. So a very powerful user of the Zarude. Went 3-0 too. And then Jigger Lax, I don't know what region that person's in. And then Willie MG, a bunch of X's, who did not win with Zarude. So Zarude is not as big of a cheat code, but you know, pretty small sample size, all things considered.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The Tapu Bulu is where it's at, really. It is not. It is not where it's at. Yeah. All right. So that's pretty much it, unless we have some last minute questions. Let me know if you know, Balk. Like, do you think this is informative or kind of interesting?
Definitely.
Yeah. Well, I
The
feel
one
like
question I have for you is, what's the next step? What do you want to do with this data?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm just collecting it right now. Originally, I'll like be perfectly honest. I just like started just to see. Our team is a team that likes to see what other people are using, right? I think everyone does, and having a more systematic way of looking at that was kind of the original goal, just to like to say, hey, Balk really likes using Talonflame or something like that. You know, like pick out tendencies. That being said, like over time, I think it's morphed into more of a passion data science project for me. Just like, you know, this isn't quite data science, but this is like, you know, more data visualization or just manipulating the data, just like seeing on a more meta scale what things look like. Because I think this really came up when we started talking about specifically Colony, because like, you know, a lot of my teams are like, Colony feels stale. It feels like it's been solved. And I was like, I wonder if that's true. And if so, if there's like some graphical visualization based way for me to demonstrate that it is true. And if not, like, you know, it might be useful to say, hey, you guys think these 6 are the core metas, but there's a sleeper pick. I think like every week I was like, you guys just saying, you know, Pinsir is doing really well. And I was like, we don't have a Pinsir. So yeah. B-Drill too. Yeah, exactly. And just really having kind of, you know, being able to pick out random tidbits, I think was kind of the motivating interest in developing this out as far as it did. And I think going forward, you know, like really, hopefully, I'm going to be doing a data science bootcamp soon, and hopefully, like having the data in a relatively clean fashion, being able to work with that data and like start doing correlations on like, you know, if I have 2 Pokemon in a core, you know, how does that core do? Or you know, talking about more longitudinal stuff, which is not as easy to do in Tableau as all this stuff that I've done up to now, and like all the stuff I've done up to now was kind of annoying to do in Tableau, but it worked just fine. So I guess moving forward, trying to do more sophisticated analyses and looking at it from a more meta scale.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, so we'll see how that works. Hopefully this stream was informative or interesting to people. I'm also going to be putting this on YouTube, so people can only catch part of it, or want to revisit some of the analysis that I did. That's pretty cool too. Obviously, probably not going to be doing this in the middle of a cycle, just because A, the data size is a little bit smaller. B, it's a little competitive information right there. Not that my teammate ever uses it, so it's kind of like, screw you guys. But just having the whole picture really to talk about, I think is kind of a fun way of kind of closing off the cycle. And I mean, the new cycle's coming up. Lots of moves coming in and out on different factions. I think I want to say the Stars is like literally the only faction that didn't lose someone this cycle. Am I right in saying that?
I'm not sure. I think we're one of the few that didn't change.
Yeah.
There are some teams that still have holes to fill too, I think. So it's going to be interesting.
It's gonna be pretty wild, but we'll see what happens. And hopefully, now that I'm a little bit more free with streaming, we can start doing some recaps for the stonks. Balk, you're welcome to join and watch and scope out all the information about our beautiful plays. But yeah, that's pretty much it. And with that, I'm gonna call it a stream. Thanks for everybody for tuning in. And if you want to catch the VOD, it'll be on Twitch later, and it'll definitely be on YouTube as well with timestamps, hopefully. And thank you, Balk, so much for coming out and dealing with technical difficulties. I think this is the very first time we've ever had your face on a video, so that's really exciting.
It is.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Peace out, everybody.
Good night.